It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Had a couple of interesting conversations recently that got me thinking about the idea of invisible capital. This idea that, and I get this a lot, especially when you're talking about people who are less fortunate. But I had a conversation recently where somebody said to me, well, I don't understand why, people would want to work for minimum wage, and I don't understand why people don't have ambition and want to work hard, and I don't understand why you go down the list. And I've had these conversations for years. Why people are homeless, why people underachieve, whatever that frame is. And it really got me thinking about, where we are as a society, where we're going, because couple that with the conversation we had a couple of days ago about the fact that, out of Davos, the report in the next couple of years, about 40% of the jobs that we currently do are going to be gone. AI is going to wipe them away, robotics, automation, whatever. It's going to be gone. And what are people going to do? But I got thinking about this after having a conversation with someone who said, look, I don't understand why, look, I have this job and I've worked hard and I do okay, and I've had this before. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, and I can do it. Anyone can do it. This frame of, if I can do it, anyone can. And I say this about myself all the time. If I can do it, you can do it. But the reality is, that's not completely true. And, I normally have these conversations with people when they bring this up of well, okay, you have this job that's afforded you a lifestyle. How'd you get it? How did you get to the job? Who bought you your first car? Who bought you your first suit? How did you get the skills to do an interview? How did you know that work, you had to show up at a certain time every day? I have a friend who did temp hiring for a couple of years, and the stories that he tells about people who showed up to work with no shoes on, said, hey, do I have to show up every day at the same time? There are things that we take for granted, things I call invisible capital. The idea that you have a family that helped you learn the idea of work ethic, the fact that you had a support system that helped you get your first car, helped you get an education, helped you do a lot of things that we take for granted. And it's easy to take that stuff for granted. It's simple. It's second nature because we don't even think about it because it's invisible. We just assume that everyone's at least where we are, at least minimally competent, where we most of us are. And the sad reality is not everyone's as fortunate. Not everyone is as privileged as you or I. Some folks have more struggles. And I learned this at a young age. I watched this happen as a child. Look, when I grew up, where I grew up in the housing project, there in the west side of Cleveland, people didn't have cars. There was no bus service. We weren't on the bus route. Public transit was a couple of mile walk away. There weren't jobs readily available in the neighborhood. So there were a lot of things that now with middle class work ethic and middle class understanding, I take for granted. And I give you, for instance, and this is where my mind, kind of kicked in on this. This week was supposed to be really cold in my neck of the woods. They said, I think it was 16 degrees, wind chill of 4 degrees. And getting a little bit older, my feet are getting a little bit cold. I've never had that problem before. 2 pair of socks and a pair of tennis shoes or a pair of work boots, I was always fine. This year, I said, I'm not gonna have cold feet. It's not gonna happen. So I went to the store. I bought a new pair of boots that I'm probably gonna wear 10, maybe 15 times this year. But dropped $200 on a pair of boots, and didn't really think about it because the mindset is my feet are not going to be cold. But as I was thinking about this and the idea of invisible capital and things that we take for granted, I thought about how fortunate that I am, that I can go and drop $200 on a pair of boots that I'm going to wear 10, maybe 15 times this year, maybe next year and the year after. And I was thinking about a story my grandmother told me. You know, back when my mother and her brother and sister were small. My grandfather had to save for new work boots. You know, saved for months to be able to buy a new pair. And she told the story about how, he went to work with boots with holes in them, and took the money that he had saved to give to her to take the kids to the circus because he wanted them to have something better. So he was willing to delay his getting new work boots so that they could have this one day, which is, now I take that for granted, but you think back to then where they didn't have a lot. They were struggling just to make ends meet. And it was a new pair of work boots were something special. So, my mind is in this space where I'm feeling very, very privileged that I don't have to think about that I have the ability to go and do this. And it got me thinking of all of this stuff coming together. This idea that, we take for granted certain, work ethics, certain, things that parents did for us, that not everyone has the good fortune to have. And normally when I go through this exercise with someone, it comes back to Donald Trump. And I asked the question, I said, why aren't we all real estate moguls? Why aren't we all, real estate tycoons owning buildings all over the place? Why not? And it usually comes back to, well, we don't have the money. And I go, no, look, we could get the money maybe. You could rent, you could, take loans out. It's possible. How come we're not all real estate tycoons? How come we are not gaming the system like Donald Trump? How come we're not Trump? And the reality is Donald Trump benefited from a ton of invisible capital. The Trump name gets you into rooms that you and I don't even know exists. Gave him opportunities that the average person would never have any opportunity to go anywhere near, just because of the name, because of the connections of his father, because of the connections of his family, and, well, the expectations that come with that. Not to mention the actual capital that the father gave them, the millions of dollars that he got. But it's that name. And it's also a lifetime of growing up with a father that gave him certain ideas. And I go back to, I think about my kids. My kids have benefited from me learning a little bit over the years. For instance, each of my kids, the second they started working, we set up an IRA for them. When they were 15, got their first job, we set up an IRA to put money away for their retirement. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. I go, I wish someone would have done that for me. I wish someone would have had the vision and foresight. I wish my grandparents would have known. They didn't. I wish they would have been, better prepared financially, but they weren't. If it weren't for their union pension and Social Security, they would have really been struggling. And it got me thinking about where we are as a country in this moment. My grandparents used to tell me stories about how during the Depression, people helped each other. If someone needed a hand, the community helped. If someone was hungry, the community helped. If someone needed, work clothes. And again, I think of the work that I do. I work outside. And to take the job that I have, you need to have some actual capital to buy, outdoor gear, gloves, winter clothes, hats, boots, all that. Transportation to get to and from work in the snow every day. You need to have that ability, but also you need to be able to show up on time. You need to have the work ethic to show up every day. And this is something that sadly we've missed. And there's nothing, it seems, that's there to help. And I go back to the stories of my grandparents. They helped their community. They helped their neighbors. So when I look at the fact that 40% of the jobs are going to go away, think about, are we going to, because there is going to be mass suffering and desperation, will we come back together? Is what they lived through, is that part of what struggle is about? Because understand, we have become a very privileged society. And I think of myself, I am very privileged. We have become a very self-centered society. And the wealthier that we get, the more self-centered it seems we get. So all of these social programs that have been under attack for the last 40 years, because I don't want to pay higher taxes. This destruction is eventually going to come around and go after all of us, or 40% of us who are going to lose jobs, of which I will probably be one of them. So I come back again and I think about, is this part of what struggle is about? That then we'll come back to the idea of community and helping your neighbor and all of that. Or were they just different people? Was it a different time that's never going to come back? How do we bring the country back together? And I think, and I've been saying for a very long time, sadly, the only thing that does that is pain and suffering, is struggle. So when the tsunami of job losses happens, and it will happen, because we're seeing stories every day of companies, they're going to bring in robots to work in factories, and we're going to do away with all of the fast food jobs and all of the low income, low wage jobs. We're going to do away with those. And I actually had some people who emailed me recently when talking about this, said, well, good riddance. We don't need them. We don't need those jobs. It'll cut costs. It'll be good for society as a whole to be done with all of that. And you go, really? You believe that doing away with people's livelihoods, well, it'll make them do something else. And I go back to, for most people doing some of the jobs that they're doing, it's the best that they can do. It's where their skills are. And unless we're willing as a society to do a whole major education campaign and do a lot of outreach to our neighbors, this sadly is where we are. And if you don't have a good mix of employment for people to be able to make their way and to be able to support themselves and their families with a reasonable wage job, we're going to have chaos. And when those truck driving jobs goes away, and you got a million, maybe 2 million people who used to make a reasonable living now on the breadline, what kind of chaos do you think is coming out of that? When there's no more fast food jobs, everything's a kiosk, and you get just like a giant vending machine. What kind of society are we going to have? And the thing is look, I'm fortunate to have the privilege that I have. I want everyone to be able to at least be where I'm at. I talk about this quite often. I think about the kid that is growing up in the housing project that I grew up in. I think about that 10-year-old that I was, thinking about what the world was going to be and what my opportunities and my chances were going to be. And I got to tell you, it was bleak. Had no idea of the life that I would lead. And I think about that kid growing up there now, and I hope he's got better visions, better hopes. And I hope we as a society do a better job of helping. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to, lots to talk about. Some interesting election stuff coming up. Some kind of funny stuff. We're going to take a break right back after this. Stick around.
We We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Our quote of the day from New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. He was quoted in The Hill as saying, that is a great example of this is not the Donald Trump, the disruptor of 2016. He said this guy has lost his fastball, and he's talking about the fact that Donald Trump confused Nikki Haley with Nancy Pelosi, and I'm going, I don't know how you do that. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but he said during his stop, Trump said during his stop, Nikki Haley, do you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed it all. All of it because of lots of things like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. He went on to say, we offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guard, whatever they wanted, and they turned it down. They don't want to talk about that. These are very dishonest people. Now, he meant to say Nancy Pelosi, all those lies, because all that stuff's been debunked. Didn't happen. Maybe in Trump's head it happened. Maybe now in the revisionist memory that is what's banging around between his ears, that's what happened. But in reality, did not. Not even a little bit. And no evidence at all, except, of course, what Donald Trump says. Now, that said... he's still going to be the Republican nominee, and the polling from New Hampshire has him ahead of Nikki Haley by a sizable amount. He's got over 50%. I think the last poll I saw had him at 55, had her somewhere in the high 30s. Because DeSantis dropped out. Did I mention Ron DeSantis dropped out? Did anyone care? No, he dropped out, and this is the most Republican thing ever. Honestly, one of the most Republican things ever. He endorsed Donald Trump. So he called him DeSanctimonious, called him Meatball Ron, insulted his wife. You name it. Trump did it to DeSantis, and DeSantis turns around and endorses him. Very Ted Cruz of him. And I got to tell you, maybe I just don't. Maybe I don't get it. But if you were to insult my wife, you were to go after my family, there would be a much different outcome. But yet Republicans, as I say, they fall in line. And we're going to watch over the next several days the rest of the party fall into line. For me, what I'm watching for, and look, I'm expecting all of them. The House Freedom Caucus, they've endorsed him. They've come around. They're now back there. For me, the one that's important, because I expect most of the Republicans, they're gonna fall into line because it's what they do. Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. But I'm waiting to see if Mike Pence's chief of staff endorsed him. I'm waiting to see if Mike Pence falls in line. Because this is an interesting frame. You're going to have Mike Pence testifying against him, and then it may even be the same press conference. Mike, you testified against Donald Trump. Yes, I testified against him, but I'm endorsing him for president. Yeah, I can see it coming. I can see it being played out because sadly, that's what the Republican Party has become. It is a cult, and you had better fall in line. Now, the interesting story is who's going to replace Mike Pence? Because clearly, Mike Pence is not going to be the VP choice. It's not going to happen because he proved himself disloyal. And understand, for Trump, loyalty is everything. And what we're going to see if he is elected is lots of retribution, lots of payback, not much in legislation. There's going to get nothing done. There'll be no accomplishments. There'll be no legislation move. There'll be nothing to actually make people's lives better. But there will be a lot of, there'll be some interesting press conferences of people doing perp walks. And the question now is who's going to be the VP poll? Now, Trump has said, you won't be surprised. Okay. But the short list, in my mind, is Elise Stefanik, the Republican from New York. She's been out there doing the shows, doing the work. There's Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. She sure wants it. I don't think Carrie Lake is going to be it. I don't see that because I think she takes too much spotlight from Trump. So I know a lot of people are like, no, Carrie Lake. No, I don't think so. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, her name's been thrown out there. The governor of Arkansas. I don't know. Not sure. That's one of those things where. If you've got Kristi Noem to look at, you're not gonna take Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sexist. Who do you think we're talking about? Some of the other names I've heard thrown out there: Ben Carson, his former HUD guy. I've heard Tim Scott, since Scott came out and endorsed him. I've even heard Tucker Carlson. And I would love to see Tucker Carlson be his VP. I think that would be interesting. And there's some outside shots of I think J.D. Vance's name has been thrown out. Lindsey Graham, which I'm not buying. But it's going to be interesting to see where this goes because I think we know New Hampshire's going to come. Trump is going to win New Hampshire. The question is by how much? If it's 50% or below, South Carolina could be interesting. It could prolong this a little bit, but I think the inevitable is going to be Trump. Trump's the guy. Now the question becomes, what do Democrats do to fill the void that's out there? If there's no horse race for our media to focus on, if the primary's over, if there's nothing, what do you do to fill the void? Now, Trump is going to do everything he can do to suck the oxygen out of the air because it's what he does. And he does masterfully. You have to give him credit. He knows how to get attention. There is a guy who never is ignored. Even if he's ignored, he figures out how to get people to pay attention to him. Democrats have to figure this out. And they've got to figure out what the message is. And I like what Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer said. You got to get the president, leaning harder into abortion rights. You got to get him, if you want to win re-election, you got to go hard into this. And you've got to do it in a way that is plain, that is blunt, that is to the point. And it's personal. She said, I think people want to know that this is a president that is fighting. And I think, she said, he has said that. To use maybe more, blunt language, maybe that would be helpful. And that would be helpful to get Joe out on the stump and being Joe Biden. But also getting out there as a party and balling up the digits. Getting out there and picking a couple of issues that you really want to go after the Republicans on. Because, look, there's a lot of fertile ground. They have done nothing to lead this country. They have said on immigration they are going to do nothing. They've come right out and said, we're doing nothing. Nothing until Trump becomes president. Does that mean if Trump doesn't become president, they're never going to do anything? Yes. Because as I've said before, the issue is more important than the solution. They need the issue. They need the border crisis. They want the border crisis. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some dark money funneled into getting people to the border because they need it. It's awful interesting how whenever something good happens for Biden, when things are, Fox News is now there's a caravan. It's quite convenient. Now, I think they've learned their lesson from the abortion issue. Nobody thought that the Supreme Court was going to completely toss it. The anti-abortion industry didn't think they were going to completely toss it. And now they're all looking for work because there's no more. But on immigration, this is something where Democrats need to take a position. They need to stand up and fight for what their immigration policy is, which I think has to be we're going to secure our borders. We're going to bring people in an orderly fashion. We're going to help where we need to, but we're gonna solve this problem with or without Republicans, because everybody wants a solution. Also, I think the abortion issue is a huge one. I think this is something that's going to motivate women to get to the polls. Also, on the labor front, over the next several months, we're going to see more factories being built. We're going to see more products made in the U.S. We're going to see more good economic news. Got to be hammering on this. I like my idea of the giant 20-foot cutouts going, I did that. Got to be hammering on the fact that we have an industrial policy. And I had someone say, well, you can't beat up on Bill Clinton. Yeah, I can. I can beat up on the Clinton legacy because it's part of what got us into the mess that we're in right now. So for me, the fact that we're going in a different direction is a good thing. And I think Joe Biden has to make a clear statement, a clear distinction that it's a new day in America. And Made in America is part of that. For me, it is that simple. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks how this all plays out. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Something I said made you think, got under your skin, made you mad, made you happy. Want to hear it? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. For our Free Speech TV audience, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time. For our radio affiliates, we're going to take a quick break. Right back after this.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So tomorrow, the big primary in New Hampshire, and could this be the end of it? Could this be where Nikki Haley, gets thumped, or is it close? And going into South Carolina, going into the next round, she makes it a game. I don't know, but here to give us some thoughts on the whole DeSantis flop. Where Nikki Haley might be able to pick up some of the slack, and is it over? Here to share some thoughts is someone who's run a bunch of campaigns. Our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So let's start first with the DeSantis. Flame out. He finally said, there's no way I can win. I'm done. He drops out. And then in the most Republican thing ever, he then endorses Trump. Why?
Well, would you not endorse your future employer? I ask you that, Rick. Would you not endorse your future employer?
No. You see, this is where I guess I'm a little different. You call my wife names, you go after my kids, you embarrass me, you humiliate me. I'm sorry, I'm not kissing anybody's behind.
That's true. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right on that. Yeah, because DeSantis took the Ted Cruz approach. They called Ted's wife, names, Trump did. But and I say that because DeSantis, I think, is obviously going to get some type of position in the Trump administration if Trump becomes president. But it's very interesting. I watched all the news reports from the national corporate media. I love how they break this down into what they want to say. Well, it was the Trump factor. He opposed Trump, but then he didn't oppose him. And then Trump said things about him. He didn't respond. Well, Nikki Haley and the rest were in the same boat. I look at it as a absolute different reason. And I think you know this. I know I said this on your show well over a month ago. And some of the shows I do, people said, well, what do you mean DeSantis will drop out before Haley? No way. I said, yes, he will. If you look at DeSantis, he was Jeb Bush redone. If you looked at Bush during the primaries and you turn the volume down, you could see Jeb Bush in agony. It was like Karl Rove was yelling, no, stay on that stage, Jeb. You're not going to get off the stage. And if you turned down the volume on DeSantis, it was the same thing. He wasn't happy to be there. He wasn't comfortable in his own skin. He had all these movements. He looked, I mean, in a nonverbal way, a psychiatrist could analyze him and say, look, the guy just didn't want to be there. He wasn't comfortable in being there. So he wasn't comfortable in his own skin. He had campaign mistakes. Anytime you start to fire campaign people in a presidential campaign, it's tough. You redo the seats on the Titanic. So he did that. Some of the big money people that were supposed to come in because Nikki Haley was all of a sudden starting to get some traction, they pulled back. So, DeSantis, I felt a month ago was doomed. I mean, there's going to be some people happy because he's out, and then his hardcore supporters. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. He tried to take his drag shows across the U.S. What he did in Florida with the LGBTQ issues, the drag issues, et cetera, he tried to, in the beginning of that campaign, take it across the United States. It wasn't a traction issue, so he did pull back on that. But I will tell you, there's a group of hardcore people for DeSantis that are extremely angry, and I'll tell you how angry they are, Rick. They haven't been this mad since the signs were taken off the water fountains. I mean, they're upset.
Oh, wow.
They're upset. Yeah, they're angry. That's anger.
That's real anger. But the thing is, and they're probably the people who put up the money, because reportedly he spent like $150 million and got I think 23,000 votes, 23,400 votes. That's like $6,400 a vote. That's more than Mike Bloomberg when he tried to buy the presidency.
Right. And he went to every county in Iowa. That's what did him in too. Every county, he was 2 points above Nikki Haley. So obviously he knew what was ahead. And then Haley, for the first time, wouldn't debate, said, well, I'm not going to debate in New Hampshire. Donald Trump isn't up on the stage. Well, he wasn't up on the stage 5 previous times. Haley knew she had him in New Hampshire. And look, you've been in this business a long time. I have too. You can be guaranteed somebody showed Ron DeSantis a poll and said, I don't care what you do in New Hampshire. You're done. Yeah. They showed him that poll, and he didn't want to go further with it.
Yeah, and if you're right that he's looking for a gig in the administration and that he's going to swallow his pride, he's going to take the meatball and the sanctimonious and the attacks on his wife, and he's going to swallow that and put it behind him because he wants a job in the administration. Who knows? Maybe putting signs on water fountains. I hope it's worth it. And I guess would this be the moment when his stock was highest? Because, there's still some people who think that Nikki Haley can come in and maybe dethrone the cult one. I don't think so, but any thoughts?
Well, 2 things. One, New Hampshire, of course, is going to be a big deal for Haley. If it comes out, 80-20 with Trump, I still think she stays in. Because we all know the past history of people who have won New Hampshire that don't exist anymore, right?
And
so
Iowa.
I still think she stays in. And yes, and Iowa. And then, of course, you got Super Tuesday coming along. And then the most critical one is her home state. Now, obviously, if Trump goes to town on her in her home state, that's going to cause a particular problem. But that's a big deal. I look at Nikki Haley a little different. And I think that for those who do not want Trump, the Koch brothers, obviously, and others, the Lincoln Project, we can go down the list of those who do not want Trump. And, basically 50% of the party that went another direction. Nikki Haley, almost in a way, has to stay active and alive because everybody's looking towards, what happens And of course, there's still the outside talk about, well, what if Biden doesn't run and then Trump can't run? I mean, there's all this speculation that I'm not saying is going to happen, although we now live in a surreal world since 2016.
Yeah, well, this is the horse race then. This is what the horse race becomes, because there isn't a horse race. There's nothing going on. Trump is going to be the guy unless something happens to Biden. Biden's going to be the guy. So we've got to create some kind of tension, some kind of push pull, some kind of race, so that people are paying attention. People care. We need to get something to get lathered up about, Bob.
Well, yes, and because like issues like that go away. All of a sudden, it's like, wait, I can't do my fundraiser anymore on stop this and stop that because the issue went away. So yes, there has to be still something out there. And then look, it looks like Trump is lucking out on the prosecution side in the sense of it doesn't. I think, with the way the legal system runs, there'll be motions. I don't think any trial is going to be decided before the election.
I agree.
None of them.
And I said that from the beginning. I see there's no way that he's found anything before the election. This is something that's going to have to happen with we at the ballot box and all that other stuff. Well, it'll work itself out. But what do you make of the recent claims of immunity, that he should be able to do anything he wants? I mean, he brought up Harry. He brought up Harry Truman dropping the bomb and saying that, if it were today, they would be prosecuting me. I'm going, I don't think you know how this all works.
No, I mean, there's a difference between especially if you're in a certified war, which we were. Truman was president of the United States. It's a military action. Now, the International Court of The Hague, they could go after Harry Truman, in international court, but not domestically. It wouldn't happen. But there's a difference between immunity in an act that a president would do, an official act, in a wartime situation. There's a difference between that and what a president does, especially if they diverted from their official actions into a campaign mode. And that's where the emails come in. And that's where this case becomes very interesting. I'm not sure Smith would have brought a case based strictly on president acted in an official, capacity. I don't think he would bring a case necessarily based on that. There has to be other things that he's looked at. So the broad immunity, yes, it'll pop up to the Supreme Court most likely, but that doesn't mean that you can say, well, I'm immune from all of the actions. It's just like, for example, the Hunter Biden plea deal. Where were the lawyers' minds in saying, well, this will make him immune from anything? You don't do those in plea deals. You don't do future immunity on anybody. I don't care if it's me, Hunter Biden, whoever it is. Well, Trump's the same way. You don't have just blanket forever immunity because you were elected. It doesn't work that way. It has to be immunity specific to the performance of the job.
Now, what's interesting to me is you were politically aware during the Nixon era. You had him trying if the president doesn't, it's not illegal. This basic defense. If I do it, I'm president. I can't be held accountable for anything. And was the country, because look, it was a time of turmoil back then. I mean, I was just a small kid at the time, but were there people justifying that, hey, the president can do whatever he wants? I mean, because I talk to people every day now that are saying, well, if Trump was president, he could do anything he wanted. And I'm going, yeah, I don't know about that.
No, it did not exist at that time. And by the way, my father was against Nixon. So in our family, my dad was against him. I wasn't really against Nixon because I looked at, the ending of the war. I know he could have done it sooner, but, I didn't have to get drafted as a result. So I was somebody who looked at the president favorably. All right. But at that time, I didn't look at it as, well, he can do what he wants. I looked at it as, missing portions of the tape. Nixon obviously, was involved in this. And I think like a lot of other people, even if you weren't Nixon haters, if you like Nixon, I can't recall people saying, oh, he's president, he can do what he wants. That wasn't that way back then. It wasn't. People who liked him still said, well, he can't just do whatever he wants.
No, he's not a king. We don't have dictators here, and that's the interesting part of this. People who have for years been telling me about the Constitution and waving it in my face are willing to set it aside for expedience because they're going to get what they want, and it's a weird kind of moment.
It is. It's a strange moment. That's why I said you never know what's going to happen after 2016. I use that as the bellwether mark in this country politically. I never thought so many different types of things would happen, but we have a historic time in our country's history where the executive power is definitely, as this moves past Trump, eventually, a couple of years from now, 4 or 5 years from now, these are going to be tested situations all the way to the Supreme Court and with Congress involved on future presidents. We've never had a situation where we've had a president indicted. So this is an opportunity, frankly, to clarify things like the Supreme Court. We've never had a situation so public of a member of the Supreme Court so invested with other people giving him things. It's an opportunity now, if they seize it, to do some first-time maneuvers and first-time changes in law. And that's how I view the Trump situation right now. It's unusual, no question about it, but it is an opportunity to kind of come out and define things, because you're right. We don't have a king. Constitution doesn't mean the president has the right to do anything he or she wants anytime they want.
But here's the thing that's very concerning to me is since there will not be a verdict, and I don't believe there's going to be between now and Election Day, there is so much coverage of Trump and all of this stuff. The Sunday shows were nothing but, Donald Trump this, Donald Trump that. And Biden's getting nothing. There's literally nothing going on. There's no discussion of his policies. There's no discussion of what he's done or what he wants to do. There's none of that. What do Democrats have to do to break through this noise? I have some thoughts, but I'm curious yours.
I'm glad you brought that up. Janet Yellen is going to be going this week. Tomorrow is New Hampshire. I think she's going on Wednesday, if I'm right. Janet Yellen is going to be going to the Midwest. That's great. And she's going to lay out, what's going on with the economy. Now, the truth is, in the housing market, because I took a break, as you know, I was flipping houses. I took a break from the market. Now I'm looking at the market and I'm like, okay, this is happening, inflation, the housing starts. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, it's better. But it's interesting when you talk to people, one, they do not relate in a sense that Biden was part of this. Number two, they aren't relating to the fact that it is getting better. It's still like, whoa, woe is me. And I understand some prices haven't come completely down, but there's no doubt the market, et cetera, the prices, everything's on the move, okay? So Yellen getting out there, I think is a great thing, but they've got to do what the Republicans do. They do it so well. When we used to leave the Capitol, Rick, we would have these talking points, and you could almost go to any congressional district and you'd be, oh, wow. Well, Bob said that in the 18th congressional district, what Susie just said out in California. So I think they need to broaden the network and use wherever possible surrogates with a theme. So I'm glad Yellen's out there, to get that message out.
No, it's a great idea. It really is. It's a great idea. They're just never going to do it. Because they're not that organized. They're not that coordinated. What was it? Will Rogers said, I'm not a member of an organized party. I'm a Democrat. That's reality. That hasn't changed in 70 years.
Right. So I think they do have to get that message out there. And what can, Biden do? I think come out with some, striking policies, especially something geared towards, I want to give you another example, geared towards, working people. He's got to beat that drum over and over. There was in the state of Ohio, near Montgomery County, the Department of Homeland Security went into a business there. And that was a business where they were trying to go around the tariffs. Biden kept the tariffs. And because Biden did keep the tariffs, and because Biden's policy of looking into tariff violations has occurred, there's a business that's trying to, not do the right thing when it comes to tariffs, trying to go through Thailand to avoid everything. So the department went in there. So Biden is enforcing through Homeland Security the components to make China behave itself.
Yeah.
Those are the things need to be. That drum need. Who knows what I just said about Ohio? I mean,
I didn't.
That's a
know.
story.
No,
that is a big story.
That's. I'm going to have to look into that because that's important.
Right.
Now I have something to talk to Scott Paul about from the Alliance for American Manufacturing, because I think that's an important story. But also, look, there's talk of doing something on the border. And I've been saying for a while that the Republicans don't want to solve the border crisis. They need it. They've said they're not going to do anything. Some of them said they're not going to do anything until Trump's president, which tells me it's more about the issue than it's about the solution. But I think now, and I think you agree, that now is the time where maybe you could get something done, because everybody believes something has to be done. I'm curious your thoughts.
Right now, this moment, as we speak, the next 3 weeks to a month is the best time in probably 30 years to do something with the border. In 30 years. And the reason, the president's engaged in the border. He got into the process late, but he's woken up now to the fact that, there needs to be something done with border policy. Look, the president served in Congress like I did, so he knows the whole give and take of this border situation for years like I do. But I think now the president said, okay, wow, this is an opportune moment. More opportunity than when he was in Congress and when I was in Congress. So the Senate is reacting to it. Great. Now, people can say, well, why didn't they react to it before? I don't know. Okay.
They want to do it now.
That's like they want to do it. And this is the opportunity. This excited me when I saw this. Then I read the article today and read the congressional translation in my mind, where Speaker Johnson said, well, this is comprehensive. We have to take a real good look at this. And that was the red flag of, not now. It'll give Biden too much credit.
That's it. That's it.
That's what that
And that's what that is. And look, I've been saying we're never going to come to an agreement on immigration. Republicans learned their lesson on abortion. They're not going to let one of their chew toy issues go away. They need it too much to keep people blinded by reality, blinded to the reality that things are moving in the right direction. And this is one of those things. I hope we get something done. And look, it'll probably be something nobody's happy with. And that's, in negotiating contracts in the past, that's usually probably a pretty good deal then.
It is. And on this issue, I promise you, the far right and the far left will be very angry, and most people will be like, okay, they did something. And most members will have political protection because they did do something. Yep. And it's not going to be something so outrageous. But what will happen here is Speaker Johnson, the conservatives will go crazy. It's not enough. We're not building 900-foot tall walls. There'll be something there. But when I saw that the speaker all of a sudden said, well, this is a comprehensive issue, I thought, okay, that's the signal that this puppy is not going to be running around the room.
There is a stake in the heart. But Bob, as always, great stuff. I'm looking forward to see what happens in New Hampshire. Looking forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you think, Nikki Haley's got a shot? Does she continue on? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1849. That was the birthday of U.S. labor leader Terence Powderly. Powderly was born the second youngest of 12 children to Irish immigrants in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. At the age of 14, he went to work for the Delaware and Hudson Railroad. In 1871, he joined the International Union of Machinists and Blacksmiths. Also involved in local politics, he was elected mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania 7 years later. Powderly is most well known for his leadership of the Knights of Labor. The Knights of Labor were a new kind of U.S. labor union in the late 1880s. They invited workers to join regardless of their trade or skill. They helped to lead the fight for the 8-hour day. In his autobiography, Powderly described why he was so committed to the labor movement, writing, "5 men in the country controlled the chief interests of 500,000 working men, and can at any moment take the means of livelihood from 2.5 million souls." The goal of the Knights of Labor was to give voice to those 500,000 souls. By 1879, Powderly rose to become the Grand Master Workman, the highest leader of the Knights. Powderly was weary of strikes as a tactic for labor. Yet, despite these personal qualms, the Knights led several successful strikes under his leadership, including one against railroad tycoon Jay Gould. The Knights grew to represent 700,000 workers across the nation. But then, the Haymarket tragedy occurred when a bomb was thrown by an unknown assailant at a workers' rally in Chicago in 1886. In the aftermath of Haymarket, there was a national backlash against labor unions. The Knights bore the brunt as membership dropped by nearly 90%. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, Bob was talking about the economy and inflation and that stuff. And what's interesting to me is the folks over at the Groundwork Collaborative, who we've had on the program over several months back. They're the folks who went and they were listening to all of the earnings calls, after the pandemic, and as inflation was rising and people were losing their minds, they were the ones who were saying, "Hey, we're actually listening to what they're saying." These CEOs and these board of directors and all the shareholder meetings, we're listening to this stuff, and they're bragging about the fact that they're gouging our eyes out. They're bragging about the fact that they're making record profits, because they're able to raise prices so obscenely high that they're lining their pockets. And, of course, that doesn't fit the narrative that it's all Joe Biden's fault. That doesn't fit the right wing, hey, it's all Joe Biden. Because everything has to be Biden's fault. It's the only way they're going to be able to unseat him. Because, look, the guy's done some really good stuff. Well, they've got a new report out. And what they're saying is, look, the reality is, prices have risen. It's risen by 3.4% over the past year. Input costs for producers have risen just 1%. And you go, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that corporate profits drove more than 53% of inflation in the second and third quarters of 2023. That means that them just going, hey, we can raise prices because hey, we can. That's what's hurting. That's what's going after people. And look, the lack of competition, the fact that we're seeing more and more consolidation and more buyouts and more mergers and more monopolization. This has a part of it. There's no competition. There's no, hey, we want to take your share of the market, so we're going to lower prices. No, there's none of that now. Now, what they say is 11% of price growth in the past 40 years prior to the pandemic was because of corporations going, hey, we can raise prices because we can. Just 11% of the overall growth in prices. The rest of it had to do with, actual inputs. And I said right after, we started to open up and the economy started to, to open up and things started to get a little tight and people were going, oh, inflation's coming. And you go, yeah, it's going to happen. I remember saying right after that going, look, all the stuff that you're buying right now was produced, either, before the pandemic or during, where the inputs weren't nearly as high as what they're gouging us for. This is good old-fashioned opportunism. They're robbing us blind. And people are like, no, it's Joe Biden. I don't know when we became a socialist country that Biden has control over all the prices that corporate America charges us, but somehow in my conservative friends' minds, he has this power. There's a switch somewhere in the Oval Office. Gouge consumers. It's a gouge consumers. It's right next to the old Soviet red phone. So they got the gouge consumers thing. But yeah, I mean, this is a surprise. And are you surprised by it? Is it a shock that corporate America is responsible for a big portion of the inflation? Now, this is right in line with many of the other studies that I've seen that put it right around 53, 54%. That's probably right where it is. So maybe, here's an idea, maybe we should start taxing them. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Sometimes I use them here on the program. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.